Welcome to Damn Good Movie Memories with your host, Brian Davis. This podcast is the cure for your long commute and super boring workday. Hey there, it's Brian Davis, and for this week's episode, we're going to cover the movie Green for Danger from 1946. The studio was Individual Pictures. The release date was December 7th, 1946. Now, this was in the UK. It didn't come out in the United States until August of 1947. The running time, 91 minutes, and it was in black and white. Leonard Maltin, from his classic movie guide, gives it 4 out of 4 stars. His synopsis is, exciting whodunit set in rural English emergency hospital during World War II. The tension neatly counterbalanced by a droll wit of Alastair Sim. As an implacable Scotland Yard inspector, it's a must-see classic. Written by Stanley Gilliatt and Claude Gurney. Now, I first saw Green for Danger at the wonderful Stanford Theater in Palo Alto, California, and it was a fabulous experience to see a film for the first time and enjoy it so much unexpectedly. Now, I now own a Criterion Collection DVD. Now, any fan of collecting movies and DVDs should always try to obtain Criterion versions when possible. Now, I will say you will pay extra, but it's worth it due to the quality of the prints and, of course, the special features. All right, let's get into the main cast. So, Alastair Sim plays Inspector Cockerell. He's not the first billed character in the film, and he doesn't actually appear on screen until 30 minutes into the film, but he's the best character without a doubt. Now, most film fans will recognize Sim for his portrayal as Ebenezer Scrooge in the 1951 version of A Christmas Carol. However, he was one of the leading British film stars during the 1940s and 50s, and he appeared in more than 50 films. There are other great actors in the film, including Trevor Howard and Sally Gray, Leo Genn, and Rosamund John. All right, let's get into the making of the film. So Sidney Gilliatt became a filmmaker in the 1920s in England, when there was a big federal push, which including federal spending on the arts. Ironically, Gilliatt was laid off in the late 1920s from the film company he was working at, he wasn't directing at the time, and was replaced by his future film-producing partner, Frank Laudner. The two first collaborated on a screenplay called The Seven Sinners, also titled Doom Cargo, released in 1936, which was also a humorous thriller similar to Green for Danger. They then wrote the equally humorous thriller which Alfred Hitchcock directed, The Lady Vanishes, which we covered 2 years later. Because of World War II, there was a shortage of film directors because the established directors were being used for the war effort, and this gave aspiring talent finally a chance to direct, and Gilliatt got his chance in 1943 co-directing with Laudner for the movie Millions Like Us about female factory workers during the war. However, the two were not enjoying working for film companies, so they formed their own company called Individual Pictures. In 1945, Gilliatt was looking to make a film for the production company and had read a novel called Green for Danger, written by Christiana Brand. She was married to a surgeon who was assigned to a military hospital. She went along to watch an operation, and the anesthetist told her how to commit a murder. She thought of turning this into a thriller, but could not think of a motive until a drunk man told her of an experience in a bomb shelter. She then wrote the book, which was published in 1941. Now, the original story takes place at a military hospital, and there was some apprehension from the censors about having a murder story that takes place in a military hospital right after the war had ended. There was also worry about the somewhat risque nature involving the relationships between the doctors and nurses in the story. Gilliatt did stay fairly faithful to the book, and the censors' concern were not an issue, ultimately, for the film. All right, let's get into the film. So it begins with the narration from Police Inspector Cockerell, played by Alastair Sim.
To the Assistant Commissioner of the Police, Scotland Yard, Sir. The amazing events which I am reporting may be said to have begun on the evening of August the 17th, 1944. New paragraph. Postman was cycling up Heron's Hill on his way to deliver mail at the hospital. His name was Joseph Higgins. I begin with him because he was the first to die. The hospital itself lay a mile away, an Elizabethan manor requisitioned and converted in the emergency of war. Another new paragraph. In the operating theatre that night, there was a surgeon, Mr. Eden. Nurse Woods. Nurse Sanson. The theatre sister, Bates. Nurse Linley. And the anaesthetist, Dr. Barnes. August the 17th, 1944. By August the 22nd, 2 of these people would be dead. And one of them a murderer.
The setting is London in August of 1944, still in the height of World War II. Shortly after the initial scene in the hospital, there is a bombing at a local post office by the Germans. We go back to the hospital and the surgery room where there's a bit of a soap opera happening. Dr. Barnes, played by Trevor Howard, and Nurse Linley, played by Sally Gray, are having an argument about being asked to a dance by another man even though she and Dr. Barnes are engaged. Also adding to the soap opera feel, the head doctor, Mr. Eden, played by Leo Glenn, is a notorious womanizer. Even the sisters, who are also nurses, seem to be infatuated with him. Later that night, a patient is brought in by the name of Joseph Higgins, who is a postman believed to be wounded from the bombing earlier in the day. He is scheduled for surgery the next morning. He's also mumbling incoherently throughout the night. To keep with the general hospital theme, later in the evening, Nurse Linley and Dr. Eden discuss her relationship with Dr. Barnes, and we find out they are no longer engaged. There is another bombing in which Dr. Eden hugs her out of instinct, then the two kiss. Dr. Eden apologizes, though Nurse Linley doesn't seem too offended by the kiss. To further complicate matters, Sister Bates, played by Judy Campbell, saw the two kiss. We can sort of infer that Sister Bates has a thing for Dr. Eden by her mannerisms, but she never says anything, at least not yet. The next morning, Higgins goes in for surgery, and some curious things occur prior to Higgins being given the anesthesia.
I shall need a new oxygen cylinder, nurse. We nearly ran this one out last time.
Very well, sir.
Good morning, nurse.
Good morning, sir.
How's the patient?
I could do with a pint.
That's the preoperative atropine.
Thank you very much.
We shan't keep you long. There's no need to worry. It's only a small thing, hardly an operation at all.
Dr. Barnes, ain't it?
That's right.
Remember me, Joe Higgins?
Yes, you're the postman.
Thought you would. You going to do the anaesthetic?
Yes.
You've got a nerve.
All right. Perfectly.
New cylinder, sir.
Right, shove it in. Oh, sister. I think I'll give the anesthetic on the table. Save time. He's not the nervous type.
Very well.
You say you're giving the anesthetic on the table?
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Stanton, bring the machine in, Woods. Do hurry.
Yes, sister.
Oh, Sanson, you can bring the patient in right away.
Yes, sister.
Oh, well, as Churchill says, man the guns, sweep the skies, plough the fields, and pull the trolley.
Who's that? Who's that? I know that voice. I've heard it before.
What's the matter?
It's the patient, sir. I think he's a bit excited.
It's only one of them.
I've heard it before somewhere. I can't remember where I heard it.
Don't worry, Mary. It will all come back later.
Yes.
Yes?
There's no danger, is there?
No, of course not. No danger at all.
Famous last words. During the anesthesia procedure, something goes wrong and Higgins stops breathing. And everything was done properly and the protocols were followed, but Higgins died before the surgery even began. The superintendent of the hospital, Dr. White, played by Ronald Adam, questions the doctors involved about the death of Higgins.
There'll have to be an inquest, of course.
Quite.
Most unfortunate. These things always create such a mistaken impression outside. Of course, I'm not suggesting anyone's in the least to blame. Barnes, are you quite certain that the tubes weren't crossed?
Positive.
You checked the machine?
Of course.
Well, I'm inclined to take the view that the man was still suffering from shock. These things are bound to happen now and then when taking justifiable risks in urgent cases.
I'm afraid we can't tell the coroner that.
Oh, why not?
Because this case wasn't particularly urgent.
Oh.
And there wasn't any risk. The patient was perfectly fit.
Should have taken the anesthetic without turning a hair.
Well, the fact remains he didn't. This would have to happen in my very first month here. It's most distressing.
Any views, Bertie?
Well,
Of course, I wasn't there, but it certainly seems a bit strange. Might get a clue from the post-mortem.
Clue? Well, I see what you mean. Well, we shall soon know. No doubt it'll all straighten itself out. Thank you, gentlemen. I don't think I need keep you.
Thank you, sir.
By the way, I don't see that this need be any reason for cancelling tonight's little gathering.
It started some time ago.
Well, quite. Well, it makes a break for the nurses. Helps morale. I might even look in a little later myself.
But not.
Dr. Barnes, would you mind staying behind a moment?
I'll see you at the clock. Right. He spoke of our little gathering as though it needed lancing. Great. Oh, great.
Barnes, you were in practice in this district before joining the hospital, I believe.
I was?
Yes. Frankly, I'm told that this won't be the first inquest of its kind you've had to attend at Heron's Park.
That's true. The other was 4 years ago.
Yes. Just a little unfortunate.
I don't know what you're implying. The surgeon and I were both exonerated.
Obviously. I'm not suggesting for a moment. Natural causes, cardiac failure, it might happen to any of us. The fact remains, people talked.
They generally do.
They will in this case.
Let them.
I don't know that we can take quite so carefree a view. We have the hospital to think of now.
I can see that, but after all...
For instance, soon after you came here, I believe an anonymous letter was received.
From some illiterate half-wit.
Beneath contempt, of course. Still, candidly, I was rather hoping for a gesture from you.
Oh?
It might, I merely throw out the suggestion, it might simplify matters if you were to discontinue your theatre duties pending...
You mean admit responsibility for Higgins's death?
Good heavens, no.
If I'm suspended, that's what it amounts to.
My dear fellow, I merely suggested that I was hoping the gesture would come from you.
Well, it won't.
Now, listen, Barnes.
In fact, the only gesture I feel like making is far from polite.
There's no necessity to be vulgar. I'm sure my predecessor would...
Under your predecessor, this hospital had a magnificent record, partly because he backed his staff to the hilt.
This is intolerable. I ask for cooperation.
You don't want
All I get-
cooperation. What you want is a scapegoat, neatly trussed up as a convenient sacrifice, in case anyone starts throwing bricks at you.
Really,
Suspend me if you like. If you do, I shall appeal. Good night.
Dr. Barnes storms out of Dr. White's office and, to make matters worse, sees his ex-fiancée dancing with Dr. Eden. Nurse Lindley and Dr. Barnes do end up connecting at the dance and talking a bit. Barnes would like to forget their argument and stay together, but Lindley is more hesitant. The other part of the soap opera is Nurse Sanson, who is constantly tormented by the death of her mother, whom she blamed herself for leaving alone before a bombing killed her. She continues to work at the hospital to keep her mind off things, but she can never fully take her mind off her mother's death. Dr. Eden suggests she take a leave of absence or leave the town altogether, but she declines. We then get another interesting conversation between the two scorned in the love triangle at the hospital, Sister Bates and Dr. Barnes.
Hello, sister. Having a good time?
Nope.
Oh. Well, I don't feel exactly festive myself. Have a drink.
I've got one. They make what's called a handsome couple, don't they?
Yes. Well, I don't know about him.
That's where I have the advantage of you.
What?
I do know about him. All about him. You think I'm an awful fool, don't you?
Why?
Oh, you know. Everybody knows by now. It's funny, I can do my work and keep my head. I might be a machine, but when it comes to him, it's funny, isn't it?
What about a dance?
He's sick of me. And I'm sick of myself.
Now, look.
You're a fool, too. You know that, don't you?
We all have our off moments.
I saw him kissing her in the ward last night.
What?
That hurt, didn't it? Well, you know how I feel. I saw him. I saw the way he looked at her. He's in love. As far as he ever can be.
If I were you, I'd have a nice cup of cocoa and go to bed.
You know it's the truth. If he wanted to marry her, do you think she'd hesitate if you weren't here?
Well, I am here.
You won't be much longer. Not if he knows about it.
What are you getting at?
You killed a girl, didn't you? A few years ago in Heron's Park.
That's not true, and I've had just about enough of it.
Now there's been another death, and White's had you on the carpet.
What's this got to do with Eden?
You're in his way, that's all.
You're imagining things.
I'm not. I'm seeing the truth. You get like that. You get to see people like you never did before. All the rotten things about them you shut your eyes to once. And that hurts, and it's a comfort. You're in his way, don't you see?
What are you getting at?
You'll find out. I'm going to join them.
So, Sister Bates not too subtly had pointed out that nobody should trust Dr. Eden, professionally and personally. Sister Bates ends up dancing with Dr. Eden, and she confronts him cryptically about what she knows about him.
I'm sorry it's come to this.
What?
Spoiling your evening, having to dance with me.
Don't be upset.
Do you think I don't know?
Now, Marion, why can't you be sensible? We neither of us ever pretended it was said. It was all over months ago, and no harm done.
Except to me.
I tried to be considerate, but you won't let me.
Considerate? You can't afford to be anything else.
What do you mean?
You see, I happen to know.
No what?
Can't you guess?
I can't.
Do you really want me to tell you? Here?
What are you talking about? What is all this?
You know, all right.
Sister Bates then runs off and decides to really drop a bombshell.
Listen, everybody. I'm sorry to interrupt the dancing, but I have an important announcement to make. A patient called Higgins died in the theater this morning. It wasn't natural causes, and it wasn't an accident. Shall I tell you what it was? Murder. Yes, he was murdered. I found out how it was done. Not quite by accident, but I found out. And believe it or not, I know who did it.
Marion, please.
And what's more, I've got something to prove it. I know where it is because I've hidden it. I've hidden it, and I'm the only one that knows where.
All right, but I suggest you come and tell Dr. White all about it. I'll take you into it.
Let me alone. I'll go when I please. McCoy.
Hello, sister.
Could I have the key of the operating test, please? I won't be long. I'm just coming back for a minute.
Okay.
Sister Bates then races to the operating room alone, or so she thinks, but Dr. Eden is following her.
What on earth's the matter with you, Marion? For heaven's sake, what is it?
There was someone following me.
Oh, don't be upset.
It was you. It was you!
Marion! Marion, come back!
She ends up making it to the operating room, is looking for something in the medicine cabinet. She then sees in the shadows a figure in full hospital scrubs holding a scalpel. We can't tell who it is. Sister Bates screams, and we can assume her fate. In the meantime, Nurse Lindley was also interested in going to the operating room, and she finds the body of Nurse Bates. It is then we are finally introduced to the person narrating the beginning of the film, Inspector Cockrell from Scotland Yard. He is by far the most memorable character in the movie and really makes the final hour a real delight. The best comparison I can give for modern viewers is he's sort of like Peter Falk when he played Columbo. He seems sort of bumbling and not really knowing what he's doing, but he knows exactly what he's doing and people underestimate him, which he uses to his advantage. His character is also the comic relief for mostly a dark mystery up to this point.
Good morning. Should I have...
Well?
Considering everything, yes.
What's wrong with him?
Just the usual slight discomfort after meals, nothing. I have an appointment with the superintendent. Do you mind telling him I'm here?
What name?
Cockrell, Inspector Cockrell. Yes, Scotland Yard, I'm afraid. It's sickening.
Dr. White, please.
A terrible business, Inspector.
Right. Well, where's the body?
In the theatre, just as it was found.
Police surgeon there?
Yes. I do hope everything can be arranged discreetly.
Shouldn't think so for a moment.
Why not?
Press?
Do they have to be seen?
Can't keep 'em out.
Oh, dear.
I don't mind. Always give me a good write-up.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Lieutenant Calder, don't you think?
Yes, sir.
Hello, Hendricks.
Morning, sir.
Kitty's well?
Fine.
Good.
Body's on the floor.
Well, Doctor, any views?
Stabbed twice, of course.
So I see.
Surgical knife found in second wound, first in heart, cause of death. Took place 9 or 10 last night. Couldn't put it any other.
You don't have to. We know within 10 minutes.
Found these on the floor. Probably worn by whoever did it and left behind.
Any fingerprints?
What nice set of hers low down on that cupboard door. Right hand.
Dr. White, could you assemble all the people you mentioned at once? Somewhere private. I'd like to talk to them.
Yes, Inspector.
I wish the man would come and get it over.
He's conducting a war of nerves, that's what it is.
When I think of her lying there like that, and only a few minutes before she was alive...
That's enough, Freddie.
Why the devil is he only after 5 of us here? That's what I want to know.
Because you're the only people who seem to have been concerned with both murders. Simple when you think of it, isn't it?
This is Inspector Cockrell. Mr. Eden, Dr. Barnes, Nurse Woods, Sanson, Linley.
Like it.
Inspector, you said both murders.
Sister Bates and what's his name, Higgins.
Who said Higgins was murdered?
Well, Sister Bates herself, for one, last night. I understood you were there, Dr. Barnes.
Yes, but I didn't realize that she knew.
What about the Higgins post-mortem?
Completely negative.
But why should anyone want to murder Higgins?
My dear young lady, how should I know? I've only just got here. But I understand from Dr. White that all of you were present when he died.
Not
Except
really.
Nurse Linley.
Interesting cross-current. I beg your pardon, except Nurse Linley, who was, however, on duty in Higgins's ward the whole of the night before.
Yes, so I was.
And all of you were at the party. So there you are.
Are you implying that one of us did it?
Well, it seems very likely, don't you think?
Inspector Cockrell, I really can't help feeling that there must be some relatively innocent explanation of this terrible...
Dr. White, please don't be fatuous.
Really?
We are dealing with 2 premeditated murders. Can anyone tell me anything they think I ought to know? If so, now is the time. Very well, pause of 30 seconds while you cook up your alibis.
Did you get us here just to insult us?
I only like to strike an informal note. Well,
I've cooked mine up, Inspector.
I hope it's good.
Oh, done to a turn. Well, I stayed here for a few minutes after Sister ran out, and then I went straight back to our rooms in the coach house, 5 minutes walk.
Anyone see you?
I don't know.
I'm sure you can do better, Mr. Eden.
Aye.
With the exercise of a little imagination. You followed Sister Bates, I believe.
Yes.
Did you catch her? As if you'd tell me if you did.
I followed her out to the terrace, but she'd disappeared. I waited a moment or two, but she didn't show up, so I went direct to the sister's room.
What? Eden. One moment, Dr. Barnes. Anyone see you?
I shouldn't think so.
The invisible man. Thanks. Now, Sanson, your turn.
Is that necessary, Inspector? She's not well, and like the rest of us, she's been up half the night.
There's nothing to tell. I was just leaving when Sister Bates stopped the gramophone and spoke to everyone. It upset me rather. It was all, well...
Highly embarrassing. Where did you go?
Straight to the coach house.
She was in bed when I got back.
Obviously, she couldn't have done it.
Unless she was fully dressed under the bedclothes, then she might have had time. That's preposterous. Naturally. Now then, Dr. Barnes, what about you?
I went after Eden.
Me?
Why? Because you thought he might be the murderer suggested by the late Sister Bates?
Oh, that's a charming supposition.
Well? Thank you.
What on earth are you suggesting,
Did
Barnes?
you catch him up?
No.
What did you do then?
Went for a walk.
Where?
In the garden.
Why did you want the key for the operating theatre?
I didn't.
You told Sergeant McCoy last night that Dr. Barnes wanted the key. Didn't you?
Yes.
Why? You're not a theatre nurse, are you?
No.
And why did you go to the theatre?
Just a minute.
She discovered the body, Inspector.
Some of our most celebrated criminals have made a particular point of doing the same.
Sister Bates said she'd hidden something. I thought the theatre was the most likely place.
I see, just feminine curiosity.
Why not?
Not the desire to remove that something before Sister Bates could use it to incriminate anyone. Dr. Barnes, for instance. Or Mr. Eden.
That's more like it.
You're positively excelling yourself this morning, Barnes.
You're the young lady's fiancé, I believe.
I was.
Do you agree with his use of the past tense?
I couldn't agree more.
Another punctured romance. Well, it comes to this. All of you had time, yet none of your stories is corroborated.
Oh, perhaps we all did it.
I wonder if you realize exactly the sort of person we're dealing with. Let me tell you how I think Sister Bates died. She hurried into the operating theatre, unlocked the cupboard, stooped down to get the evidence she had hidden there.
What was it?
I don't know. Yet. Then she heard something. She turned and saw a figure standing in the dark, masked and gowned and gloved. I imagine she just stayed where she was, staring. Then the murderer came slowly over to her and stabbed her. Dressed her in this soiled theatre gown and stabbed her again. Through it, to make it look as if she'd been killed wearing the gown.
But why?
I don't know that either. But what we do know is that the second wound was made after death. The murderer was in a hurry. As you see, he tore the gown somewhat. Now, there's one other thing. This bottle of tablets was taken from the poison cupboard. Dr. White has checked the contents, and there are 4 missing.
A lethal dose.
The murderer has them and will not hesitate to use them. 4 of you are in mortal danger from the 5th. Above all, don't trust your neighbor, your roommate, your fiancé, or your friend. He or she may be the murderer. Come instead to me. Sister Bates died because she knew something and was foolish enough to say so. I beg of you, all, not to make the same mistake.
I'm sorry.
Thank you, Miss Wood. You showed great presence of mind. Take her back.
I shouldn't do that again if I were you, Inspector.
Why not?
Because Nurse Sanson is on the verge of a nervous breakdown.
Actual or assumed?
Perhaps you would prefer to judge that for yourself. 3 months ago, her mother was buried under the ruins of her house in a raid. The rescue squad dug for her for 3 days and then gave it up. Next day, she was found, still alive. She died an hour later. Esther was there the whole time.
You'd scarcely be expected to know that.
So without bothering to inquire, you scared the life out of her like any flat-footed copper off the beat.
The police force has not a monopoly of fallen arches, Dr. Barnes. Ask any chiropodist. Thank you, Mr. Eden. Before the war, you had a house in Heron's Park, I believe.
Yes?
And you had a practice in the district?
I did.
Good. Well, then, Dr. Barnes, would you care to accompany me to the theater?
All right, everyone is a suspect, and I've set everything up nicely for you. The remaining 45 minutes is suspense thrilled, and again, the highlight, besides the mystery tale, is Inspector Cockrell with his dry sense of humor and wit and questioning tactics of the subjects. Now, if you're a fan of early Hitchcock or just murder mysteries in general, you should really enjoy Green for Danger. Plus, the ending has an awesome twist that you will definitely not expect. And as it turned out, director Sidney Gilliat made the character of Inspector Cockrell much more eccentric in the film compared to the novel, and this works mainly because of Alastair Sim's terrific performance. All right, as I've been doing for many, many weeks, we got our special guest Samantha, who always gives great insight, and she loves watching movies that she hasn't seen yet, especially from the 30s and the 40s, so she talks about Green for Danger, and I'll be back next week to talk about yet another random movie from my DVD collection. Okay, we are back with Samantha. Welcome back.
Hello.
So here's another movie, Green for Danger, from 1946 that you have not seen before, but I thought that you might like this one, and you're always a trooper about watching films you haven't seen, especially older ones. I don't subject you to some stupid comedies, though. We have found out that you like some of those stupid comedies, so it's good. So how did you feel about this one? Because this one's very Hitchcock-esque, and I know you like Alfred Hitchcock.
Yeah. So this movie was really a fun discovery because I feel like it's rare where I watch something that I've never heard of it. Mm-hmm. I've also did not recognize any of the actors. And also I really just don't see a lot of, I think, British movies from this period. I think due to like the war and all of that, like it's really an area that I haven't explored too much. I think just, Hollywood movies were a lot bigger than British film industry at that time. So yeah, it was a fun discovery. I liked having a change. It was a different sort of thing. And yeah, I think in the vein of Hitchcock thrillers, it totally lined up with movies I like.
So I was curious, I was going to ask if you had ever seen Alastair Sim before, because he's of course famous for playing Scrooge in the Christmas Carol.
Yeah, I realized that after the fact when I looked him up. I'm like, oh, okay.
So I think the first thing that struck me when I saw this at the Stanford Theater for the first time, probably about 15 years ago, and I loved it. And I think everyone that sees this loves the inspector character because he's so funny without trying to be funny. So how did you?
Yes.
I had to. I have to assume that you loved him too.
Oh yeah, I love quirky, kind of dry but a little awkward
Right.
personalities. And yeah, at first I didn't know if he was supposed to be a little kind of funny, but I think that was the intent.
Yeah.
And I didn't look into it too much, but I felt like he was kind of a character that could have been turned into could have been a series
Yes,
of
absolutely.
films, like a recurring character. He reminds me, this is very dorky, but I love watching like Masterpiece Theater.
Oh, yeah.
And like Agatha Christie
Mhm.
adaptations. And I love that like her character Poirot, the detective. So there are different types of people, but I felt like he could have been one of these kind of genre detectives.
Yeah, absolutely. And before we were chatting about this, you had mentioned that there was a tie-in between Hitchcock and whatnot. So as it turns out, the filmmaker wrote the Hitchcock movie The Lady Vanishes 2 years earlier. So that's
Okay.
I think that's the connection you were looking for.
Yeah, yeah. I think it was Sidney Gilliat. I was reading up
Mhm.
on some stuff. Yeah, because there are definite similarities, I think, with how it's paced, and then with the big reveal at the end.
Yes. Yeah.
It had that Hitchcock feeling.
And what's interesting is about The Lady Vanishes. If we tie it in, you're spot on about having the inspector have his own like kind of film series, because in The Lady Vanishes, those two duo, the two buddies that were going to go see the cricket match that were upset, they actually spun those off into films. So that's kind of interesting that the same writer
Oh,
would kind of
yeah.
get into that.
Yeah, but that's interesting.
Yeah, yeah. So we'll get back into it. So I know the first time I saw it, I didn't have a hard time following it, but there is a lot going on there. So do you think this is one you have to really concentrate with, because there is a lot going on, and some of it is kind of smoke and mirrors too.
Yeah, I think there were two things that I not that I struggled with, but I did have to pay close attention, because one, I think the setting and a lot of the context was not clear from like the modern perspective.
Right.
And then two, how there were, several people introduced at once, and it was a bit confusing to follow the different stories. But if you stick with it, it worked out. And I did look up a bit at the end just to figure out exactly what was happening at the beginning. Because if you don't know a lot about, the British experience during World War II, you're kind of wondering, like, where are these people?
Right.
What's going on?
Right.
But yeah, at that time, they were dealing with a lot of, in that part of England, they were getting bombed still by the Germans. So
Right.
yeah, this was a hospital in England.
Yep.
And that whole kind of community surrounding this hospital, even though it kind of looked a bit like a Disney set. Like
You're right.
It looked
Yes.
like a little Disney village.
Yes.
So yeah, I had to kind of read up on that a bit to kind of confirm, like, what exactly is going on? Like, what year is this? And then, like, why are all these people here? But once I figured that out, it really was just a simple kind of revenge murder.
Yeah, whodunit? Oh, very much.
Whodunit, yeah.
So how did you feel about there was kind of a soap opera angle with the nurses and the I guess the doctors. So did that, I almost think that like they put that in just so it could kind of keep you off track too.
Yeah, oh totally. Because you're wondering, maybe I thought for a while that maybe the first man who died, like maybe he knew something about some sort of relationship secret, or because of the kind of that love triangle in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah, all the nurses were a bit suspicious. And at first you kind of, I think like the detective says, like, everyone's a suspect. So
that's right.
you were kind of getting pushed in all these directions. And in the end, the kind of the reason for the deaths and the attempted death was not really related to that group at all.
Right, which actually I think is great. So and you didn't give anything away there, but people definitely have to watch this because it's not when I first saw it, I was like, okay, I didn't expect that at all.
No, not at all. But it does kind of tie in the context of where they are and these bombings. And so that all is very important in the end. It all kind of comes together in the fact that there's an anesthesiologist and these nurses. So kind of all the parts intersect. And it was pretty clever how it all came together.
I think one of the reasons you appreciate older movies a lot is you do have a deep appreciation for history and you're interested in history. And so I think if people if they don't kind of follow history at all, then they might have a problem with certain movies. Like certain movies are fine if they're screwball comedy, but this one, as you said, you really kind of have to be in tune what was going on at the time to appreciate it. I always did you ever watch any of the reruns of Columbo? With Peter Falk from the 70s?
You know what? I've never seen an episode.
Okay.
I've heard about it forever, but I've never seen it.
I think the best comparison to the quote unquote modern of the inspector, modern day inspector would be Columbo, because Columbo was kind of this bumbling guy who was like a pest, but he was always one step ahead of everyone. So everyone underestimated him, but he kind of knew what was going on the whole time. Now, not to give anything away. Yeah, not to give anything away, but we're not sure if the inspector is quite as great at his job, but that kind of leads to the funny ending without giving away. But
yeah, exactly. Because he shows up and he says he's part of Scotland Yard and he's a official detective, but he kind of just asks really simple questions and kind of lingers around. Right. And there's some funny moments of him kind of like walking around outside and like spying a bit. And
yeah, exactly.
What's he really doing? But yeah, he's a smart guy, come to find out.
Yeah, I really wish they would have made more movies with him like that. Now, he might have had like that, Alastair Sim may have made movies similar to that, but not with that particular character, unfortunately. Was there anything else that you took away from this that you would, you would mention, or I would assume that you would recommend this movie?
Yeah, I would recommend it. I think what I found charming as I'm a bit of a Anglophile, like I love British history and that whole kind of world. And I loved listening to their accents because these are like the old school kind of, a lot of them have that old school theatrical British accent.
Yes.
So it really added to the whole atmosphere. And the mystery was good, not too confusing. And there was one thing also that it would kind of give away the ending, but I think something that would have benefited from having color film at the end.
Yes, good point.
There's a reveal that it doesn't really have the big impact.
No, and you're right.
And white.
And we kind of slyly say it has everything to do with the title of the film. So
yes, exactly. Exactly. Because afterward I was like, why is it called Green for Danger?
Right.
Oh.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, you're totally spot on. So yeah, I think you're used to it because you appreciate black and white movies. You watch a lot, but for those not adept with that, it might throw them off even more.
Yeah. But it was a great movie. I loved the juxtaposition of the, like you said, the bumbling, quirky detective with the very posh, uptight doctor and the romance drama. It had a bit of everything.
Yeah. Of the doctors, which one did you prefer? The Trevor Howard one, Dr. Barnes, or Leo Glenn as Dr. Eden.
I think Barnes, the anesthesiologist, better. I think they called him Mr.
Eden, which I always thought was weird. Yeah.
And he's a doctor. Maybe it has to do with a class thing. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But he was just a little to me.
Yeah. Which actually is perfect because that's part of the allure to the mystery, because you kind of assume things about him.
Yeah, and he does kind of redeem himself at the end, because the whole movie you're kind of like, is he a bit of a flirt? Is he up to something bad?
Right.
What's his deal here?
Yep.
And, we kind of learn that, again, because of this war experience, all these people have been moved to this hospital. So it's like they didn't really know each other beforehand. And they're all working together now. And the personalities were interesting. And the different doctors too. So.
Yeah, definitely. So you would definitely recommend it.
Yeah, I would. It was a quick watch.
Well, excellent. See, I'm batting 1,000 right now because I don't think I've suggested a movie that you haven't liked. So that's good.
Okay. Well, if we stay in this time and genre, I think you'll do okay.
I'm pretty safe. Okay, good. As always, thank you so much, Samantha.
Hey, thanks.
Come hang out and chill with Brian A. Davis and the Bad Beat. Wednesdays, 11 p.m. Eastern, right here on thatmetalstation.com.